IVM.
Hi and welcome to Know Your Kanun. This is Amber from EMRA Ventures, and then yet again we are together on an edition of Know Your Kanun talking about immigration. But today it's going to be pretty special as I have two specialists with me on the show. I have the Stephen Green, who is founder of Green and Spiegel, and now we are working closely with him. And I have someone very impressive from his team, who I also happen to have the privilege of working with, Miss Heilit Stein, and she's also joined us today. And welcome, guys! Thank you so much for being here with me on the show, and welcome to this platform. Stephen's been here a couple of times, and Alit, I think this is the first time you've been here with us. So welcome to the platform. And I'll now leave you guys to introduce yourself to my audience. I think people know about Stephen pretty well. So Alit, could you do the honors for us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Amber. So I am a lawyer with Green and Spiegel in Toronto, Canada, and I've been with the firm for 15 years. I do all immigration law, but right now I am working as the permanent residence practice director. So I oversee a team of about 10 staff and 2 junior lawyers who work with me, and all we do is Canadian permanent residence immigration applications. So we specialize in that area.
Perfect, Heidi. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So, Stephen, we've spoken about immigration a lot, and now recently, since we've had the opportunity to work with you on a couple of assignments, rather, Stephen, since we put you in this fix, what do you think about our engagement? How do you feel after the first month of having borne through AM Rana's employees?
No, Amber, I think it's a great, honor to work with your law firm. There's a lot of difficulty with respect to applications coming from India, right, with respect to documentation and understanding the proper process. I'm sure you've come across in your practice so many situations where people can take, as we say, the absolute straight road and they get their immigration, but for some reason they're guided to go left, go right, go left, go right. And it's so nice to work with your people so that we know they always go straight to the finish line. And that's what everyone wants. So, it's a great opportunity to work with you in that respect.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I think I've made my brownie points for the day on the show. So I'm very happy with that. Rather, our experience has been really pleasing because, Stephen, we haven't had the opportunity to work in the field. And I want all listeners to listen to this. The amount of time I, as a partner, put up with Stephen to make sure that we have the correct type of people coming in, and also the complexity of the programs. The problem with the Indian diaspora currently is that the so-called agents in our market are actually taking us for granted. And in my past 1 month, I've come across programs I'd never heard of. So when I sit with these guys and they tell me there is a scheme where you buy this place in Nova Scotia and I'll let you move, and I just think, well, I never spoke to Stephen about this. How the hell is this program valid? And they come back to me with flyers and I don't know what not. So it's trying to sort this out in whichever way we can. I mean, at least we're trying on the effort, and I'm very thankful to everybody at Green and Spiegel for being so patient with us in order to understand, and help us with this. So thanks, guys. And Heilit, we'll hand it over to you because permanent residency is your area of expertise. And of course, I'm sure you come across scores of such applications. But as far as India is concerned, I would want to know if you could share some of your experiences, and then I'll share, and maybe Stephen would be able to comment on them.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yes, as you said, immigration and permanent residence in particular it's a very broad area. There are a variety of different programs where you really have to understand the ins and outs of the requirements, because especially in recent years, what we have been seeing with these permanent residence programs and the different streams, the requirements are changing constantly. And, immigration doesn't give you second chances. So especially, with systems where they're trying to process a large volume of applications, with quick processing times, you submit your application, and if there's, one document or one piece of information that's missing or that's done incorrectly, they'll just refuse and they'll send the whole application back. And you have to start the process over again. So very, very important to ensure that the documentation that's being submitted is, correct. that it meets the requirements of the programs. And with respect to, to India in particular, as you said, when people are using agents that may not be familiar with, the most up-to-date changes and the most up-to-date requirements, sometimes those documents that are provided, unfortunately, cause the applications to fail.
You used the word agent, Amber used the word agent, and I think it's really important to let your listeners know that it is against the law, and I repeat this again, it is against the law for someone in India to contact an agent who is not either a certified consultant by the immigration body inside of Canada or a Canadian lawyer. And if the immigration department finds out that you are using a local agent with respect to giving you advice, with respect to filing your application, then you could be barred from Canada for 5 years. So it's so important that you understand that. And that's why, our office, we help so many people from India, and where Halit sort of, specializes in the express entry system for the Indian, diaspora. Maybe Halit, you want to talk a little bit about the express entry system, what's going on, how it's working, things like that.
Sure. So I'll touch on that. So the express entry system it's typically our preferred route in terms of applying for permanent residence. And the system is essentially an application management system where applicants who meet certain points thresholds can go into the system and express to the government that they are interested in applying to permanent residence. So you have to have a year of skilled work experience to go into the system. You have to meet certain language levels, and you have to show that you have education that is equivalent to a Canadian degree. If you meet these sort of underlying criteria, as well as the underlying points threshold right now at 67, you can go into the system. And once you're in the system, you get scored against other candidates in the prospective pool. So the government looks at things like your age, your education, what's your work experience, whether you have a job offer in Canada, family in Canada, things like that. And then based on your score, typically every few weeks, the government will invite top-ranking candidates to apply for permanent residence. But what we've been seeing sort of over the past year is that, a lot of the invitations are geared towards people who have accumulated a year of Canadian work experience. And so sometimes if you're looking to apply in this program, what our recommendation is to come to Canada on a work permit first, gain your Canadian work experience for a year, and then, it will be much easier to get invited and to qualify under this program.
Halit,
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you mentioned this word job offer, and I think it's really important here to talk a little bit about it. And Amber, you can go ahead and jump in with some of the things that you've seen with respect to people in India that, have done the wrong type of thing. So a job offer means that the department in Canada, which is called, Service Canada, they look at the labor market to see if this job can be filled by a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. And if the job can be filled by a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, then you don't get any points on this express entry system that Halit was talking about. However, if the job cannot be filled by a Canadian or permanent resident because there's a shortage of those type of jobs, then the department in Canada responsible for jobs gives you something called an LMIA. But, we have seen people come to our law firm and saying, hey, I've got this LMIA, I get extra, 50 points or 200 points. And they say, yeah, it was really hard for me to get, and I paid all this money for the job. Be very careful on that. It is against the law to pay for someone to give you a job. So watch out. I mean, Amber, have you come across, that situation in India where people come to you and say, hey, I paid for this LMIA, I get these points, and then suddenly the employer's gone?
The problem, Stephen, rightly put out by you. In fact, I was going to bring this up next, is that, and this is the challenge I'm facing right now, even with educated clients and HNIs in India who feel that, what we are preaching here, trying to tell them in correct sense, is wrong. In fact, day before yesterday, I was on a call with a big investor in Delhi regarding some legal work, and we were discussing immigration, and he wanted to come to us. And he said, well, you know what, I'm in my mid 40s and I want to immigrate, and you guys are saying this is the process. I don't believe in it. And I said, well, this is the process. Well, he just got on a call and he confirmed it to me that somebody was charging 70,000 CAD, Canadian dollars, and was trying to tell them that, hey, this is the perfect amount on basis of which we'll give you a job in a corporate. And since I'm not even equipped to, suggest people on immigration and stuff, and we get Stephen on board to assist with that, we told him, well, you know what, look at how it goes. But the problem that came to me at that point of time was this, that somebody did reach out to him and tell him that, hey, this is what you can charge and you will get a job. Now, that's problem number one. Problem number two, people feel when you go to a lawyer, because as a lawyer, I do have a fee, and so does Green and Spiegel have a fee. The problem with people at that point of time is they feel, why can't we go scot-free by hiring a consultant who'll get us a job, who'll get us a confirmation, and will send us off? And on account of that, I have shared previously, I don't know whether I remember over email as well with Stephen, that we've had 3 to 4 cases, and I'm also pursuing certain more, where people have been promised jobs, and when they landed in Canada, the employers refused to just keep them after a period of 6 months. And what do you do then when you end up paying $50,000-$60,000? So this needs to be weeded out, because there were certain programs, I believe, which were running in Canada at a point of time, especially the owner operator. I don't know what that program is all about. Maybe we can talk about it here with Stephen. But people still believe that it is the easiest way to go there rather than following what routes are available. So I completely second the point that paying and let this be a point for. We're talking about Canada for sure, but as a lawyer, I can assure you, in any jurisdiction, if you do something of this sort, to seek something which you're not eligible to do, it's a violation of the constitutional, the constitutional framework. It's a violation of the labor code and the ethics, and more so in Canada of the immigration and the areas around it. So I will suggest to anyone and everyone there that please do not seek out a job offer and move on that. It is not correct at all. And that is why we have Green and Spiegel with us. When you have such doubts, we refer you to them, and you just have to ask the right question.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Whenever I hear anyone that pays for a job, right away my back goes up, because I know there's something smelly about it. It's just not right. I don't pay for a job in Canada for someone to hire me. Most people do not pay for valid jobs. So there's a problem there. And remember, in immigration, everything must be truthful and honest. You cannot be involved in any sort of fraud. And if immigration finds out you're trying to trick them, they can take away your immigration and you can be barred from Canada for 5 years. So,
Stephen,
it's so important.
I think that's an important point as well, that it's not just one level of assessment that we're going through. So, if the Labor Department doesn't find out that you've paid for the job and, they approve something, and then you go and you apply for permanent residence to the Immigration Department based on that job that you've paid for, the Immigration Department, when they're assessing the application, has to assess genuineness of the job offer. If they determine that it's not a genuine job offer and this is something that you have paid for, your application will be refused. You'll be barred for 5 years on misrepresentation. And you can guarantee that any future attempts to apply for immigration will be scrutinized much, much more closely. And then lastly, if you do get approved and you become a permanent resident, and it later comes out that you've applied, you've paid for your job offer and have not been truthful in your application, your permanent resident status can be taken away. And we have seen situations where the government will go after people who have misrepresented something in their permanent residence application and actually take away their status years later. So
No, and I like to highlight, that's very nicely put by you. In fact, I like to highlight a point here that, even though we work with Green and Spiegel, and so do other law firms, even we are not engaged in the process of providing any core immigration advice to anyone on our own account, no matter how closely we work with our overseas partners. So you must realize when an agent is sitting across the table and guiding you on a process, you can just take into the concept that how does he know about the immigration process when he's not even registered, he's not gone through the rigorous training, he does not know. It's like somebody preaching criminal law to me in India or taxation law to me in India, sitting overseas somewhere around the world. So you must realize that when people reach out to you and say that, hey, we are an expert in this field, please take it as a chance that it cannot be possibly, because it takes years and years of experience and licensing and all of those procedures to be able to even tell someone that this file is correct or not. Just because you've read some articles online on Google and maybe you've gone to the website and read through, it does not make you a specialist into the field of immigration at all. I'll now like to come to the second part of things, guys. Maybe, Stephen, this is what I want to discuss with you, and this is what the audience would love in our session. I want to demystify this owner-operator scheme. What is this all about? Why is it that everybody in India only talks about owner-operator scheme, whether it's a session on taxation and in North America, or I don't know what, whenever Canada pops up, and people strongly believe in it. And I believe it is one of the largest schemes where a lot of frauds happen, because I have cases in Haryana Punjab High Court where people have done fraud on this scheme by making people invest overseas. And now those guys are absconding. What is, can you guys just explain what this is to my audience so that they also understand?
Sure. So what this owner operator thing is remember I talked at the beginning that you have a job offer and the Canadian government then certifies that there aren't any Canadians or permanent residents are available, and you get some points in the express entry system. Well, they had a small little category which was called owner operator, meaning that if you were coming to Canada and you were going to set up your own kind of business here, and you had a certain percentage of that business, then they would give you that special certificate, which would give you points in the express entry system that Halit talked about. But the government was very concerned, as you mentioned, that there was a lot of fraud going on.
Absolutely.
Out there, where people were starting these companies in Canada, they never really, worked in them, and the government examined it for a while and came to the conclusion that it was just too hard to manage, so it has been canceled. As of April the 1st, 2021, there is no such thing as owner-operator anymore. It does not exist. Halit, you want to add anything to it? I mean, you must have seen a lot of that during your express entry stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, the draw was that it gave an additional 200 points, which is fairly significant in terms of the express entry system. And so, it came down to the genuineness and on assessment, immigration was finding that unfortunately a lot of these job offers were not genuine because, people were kind of giving themselves job offers in companies they were setting up which weren't actually actively engaged in business. So, I think it unfortunately resulted in the program being canceled for those people who were using it genuinely. And now we're back to looking at job offers, in the traditional sense.
Right. And Amber, if anyone, hears the word, hi, I'm going to get you an owner operator, well, right away, that tells you that the person they're dealing with doesn't know what's going on in Canada with respect to immigration.
And that's the breaking news for all of you guys out there, because I wanted this to come up. There is no owner operator currently. There is no particular way of moving to Canada, which Stephen is saying, except for the streams that are probably in place. You just cannot, Stephen, I'll come to the next part of it. This is where, again, you will come in and you and I both can talk, because somebody again told us, and there's a criminal proceeding in that in which they came and told us, the agent told us that, the jurisdiction of the Canadian government does not extend to India, and how can we constitutionally prosecute someone who does not practice in the jurisdiction of Canada, and so forth, so on. But fraud remains the same in both jurisdictions. So we had a correlation where we said, well, you've committed a fraud by defrauding someone and promising someone on loss of something. But the individual said, and this is where I'll take your point on this. The individual said, but I did let this person who I promised something invest in a house, in a housing project near British Columbia. There's a lake, and in the area, I don't know, it's designated Indian territory, so called. And they said, well, he has a property that he owns in the valley. It was Okanagan Valley, if I'm not wrong, around that area. And they said, well, I've got him a housing project there, and he's drawing a monthly rental or something. Is it even possible for somebody to buy a house without having a citizen status? I mean, a foreigner, and how do they pay the taxes? Because this is no route to gain immigration anywhere in the world, because if that was so, then probably half of the world would just buy places and move to another country. So this is a misconception which is running.
So there's two things that we have to talk about here.
Yep.
One is anyone is allowed to come and buy property in Canada. If they want to buy a house, we'd love to take the Indian diaspora's money. We're very happy to sell as many houses as we can to as many, people outside of Canada. There's no issue there. And we love to collect the taxes on the property, things like that.
Yes.
But as far as immigration goes, there is absolutely no program where you buy property and you get immigration. Our whole immigration program of bringing skilled workers or business people to Canada is that there is an economic benefit to Canada in the sense of job creation, in the sense of running a business. There is no passive investment which would provide you with immigration. So Amber, if you came to me with, a client of yours who said, oh, I want to buy a beautiful apartment building in Canada, and that apartment building is 100 million Canadian dollars. We would say in Canada, thank you so much for buying the building. You can come and visit it when you would like, but that's about all you can do with that building. You can visit it, get income from it, but it does not help you in any immigration program that I am aware of. There is no passive investment permitted. And the actual immigration law is really interesting when we talk about passive investment, because as many of your listeners know, there are provincial programs where the government of Canada has said to British Columbia, hey, British Columbia, you want to create a business program? You can do that. The people come on a work permit first, and then they can, after a period of time, they can perhaps apply for immigration. But the provinces, so you can imagine the federal government says to the province, if you create a program that encourages people to move into your province that is passive, meaning they're not running a business, they're not actively engaged in business, then they will be denied immigration. So this concept of passive investment is throughout our Immigration Act, which specifically says passive investment today does not get you immigration to Canada. The only, and I'll restrict this to the only province in all of Canada that has a special passive where you actually just pay money is the province of Quebec, but it's a very expensive program, and that program has been closed now for coming up on 2 years. So there is currently today in Canada no passive investment program.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear, because the listeners, and this is and for all of you out there, this is what I'm going to be doing on this podcast, because Stephen is literally the god of immigration there, if I use that term, and I can tell you all, he knows it all out there. So when we have experts like this talk about it, please do believe them, because when you write into us on the podcast front asking me questions, this is the best platform where we'll answer this. And I want all of you to know this, that it is not easy to immigrate to Canada, as the word of mouth goes around in the country that, hey, if you can't go anywhere, just immigrate to Canada. You cannot. you cannot literally move to Canada. And I like to get you engaged in this on the express entry front as well. There are a bunch of educated people, and when I say educated, we have different definitions. For me, the definition of educated here in India stands with someone who's just got a college degree and just working somewhere. There is a bunch of section of society here who feels that just because they have a master's degree and an IELTS score of 6, and so forth, so on, and they feel that maybe in their 40s that they can get through PNP. But I do not agree, because I applied for my PR on my own in the Federal Skilled Workers as a lawyer. And I know how much I had to research when I did all the documentation by myself from down to scratch, and including my wife's profile into it. And it does not seem like that everybody starts talking about file for a provincial nomination program if you don't qualify for this, without knowing the schematics of each of these provinces. It's just not that because Alberta has a lower CRS score, that does not mean that all professions get picked up. So can you throw some light on how these programs actually work? It does not mean that you just create a profile and then put in all the provinces you feel you can get selected. I'm sure there is a system to it as to how they get picked.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting that you're talking about the intersection between express entry and these provincial programs. So the express entry system, we look at, you put your profile in, you get a point score based on a variety of factors. If you're educated and you've got a master's degree and you're in your 40s, you may not actually score as high as you think you would in terms of competitiveness against other candidates in the pool. One of the interesting things about this system is that the points start to decrease for age once you hit 30. And by the time you're at 45, you get nothing for age. So you have to be able to make up the points in other ways. And one of the ways that people often talk about is through getting a provincial nomination. I think a lot of times people research the points online and they see, I can get 600 points if I have a provincial nomination. So why don't I just do that? And I'll put it in and I'll get my extra 600. Well, as Stephen said, each province runs its own provincial programs, both through the express entry system, as well as programs that are run entirely outside of the express entry system. Most of those outside the express entry system are based entirely on having a job offer in the province that's nominating you. Some of them require as well several years of work experience in the province. Some require other ties to the province. And the ones that are run through the express entry systems, again, most of them require some sort of tie to the province. So you would typically need to have a job offer. And then the way these systems work is that they're also often on an invitation-based system where you need to be invited by the province to apply for an express entry provincial nomination certificate. Those invitations tend to be issued to candidates who meet criteria in the provinces, where the provinces have determined that people with certain skill sets in certain occupations will be able to economically establish and are likely to economically establish in that province. They are not announced in advance, typically. So, just because you put in an interest to a province saying you'd like to have the opportunity to apply for a nomination certificate does not necessarily mean that you're going to get invited if you don't have the particular experience that they're looking for in a round of invitations. So it's certainly, I always look at the different provincial programs to see whether something may make sense for a candidate who maybe doesn't score high enough in express entry to get invited on their own. But there really aren't necessarily guarantees, that just because you say you're interested, the province will invite you. So we really have to look at the patterns and things like that of what we've seen historically to be able to determine how likely it is that someone might be invited by a province.
No, and thank you so much for that. I'll tell you why, again, this plays an important part, at least in the Indian subcontinent, is there is a major chunk of agents, and I'm using the word agents again, who particularly tell people that if you don't make it into express entry, well, we'll file it on your behalf in one of the provinces where you're eligible to do so. And when I was applying, I got an email from one agent, and I'll name them subsequently in my other podcast, not here right now. But they did tell me that you qualify for XYZ province, and the province at that time was Alberta, they told me. And when I asked him, I said, how is it possible? How did you find out that I am suiting the bill for this province when I have just shared a resume with you and you don't have formal training on this? So the idea with the agents is that it really doesn't matter to them as to what your profile is. For them, it's about those couple of $1,000 in Indian rupees that they want to make by just making you file into anything. And I suppose it works on that, or they're particularly getting engaged with individual lawyers or agents, I don't know, in Canada, who guide them as to where to apply. But when it happens here, the major chunk of the population ends up losing that trust and the money to a bunch of people who just make you file random applications on your process. Like, I'll give you a classic example. When I was working with PricewaterhouseCoopers as a tax head for my South Asian market, and we had a couple of juniors with me who wanted to immigrate, and they applied. All right. And when they applied, and I was sitting right across, and that's how my curiosity 10 years back got more, that this agent walks up, and I was not even thinking of Canada, and he tells this gentleman, hey, you know what, you've got a profile of a tax manager, but you've got a law degree. So when we asked him, I said, how do the two work? What is the connection? He says, you just have to prove 2 years and blah, blah, blah. I know what he did. He took $4,000 from this gentleman and made him file his application. And he's still in India working with one of the big fours because it did not go through. So what would you suggest to people here? I really want you to come out and tell people here. Stephen, maybe you and then Hailey. I want both of you to comment on this.
Yeah, I'll touch base quickly on.
Yes.
You raise an important point with these provincial programs as well. They also are subject to annual quotas. So it's really, really important to look at the particular point in time that somebody is applying and is putting their profile in to see, number one, has the provincial quota been met, or is it close to being met for the year? Because some of these programs fill up, very, very quickly. And then secondly, to look at the historical patterns to see whether there are patterns that can be identified, because just because you meet the maybe minimum program criteria does not necessarily mean that you will be selected by the province to even apply for a nomination certificate. So when we look at these cases, we're looking at the point in time that somebody is applying and backwards to see what the trends have been.
And Stephen, can you surmise this? Because, it's such a hoax here and we just have to suffer, all the while because of this.
Well, remember that the whole philosophy behind the provincial nominee programs is to invite people that intend to live in the province. So there's a whole other issue of misrepresentation where you go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to apply to the Saskatchewan PNP program. And you arrive and you leave the next day. Well, they could turn around and say you misrepresented because you never intended to live in Saskatchewan. So, again, I can't emphasize how important it is to be honest and truthful throughout this whole system. And if you are honest and truthful through the system, we're pretty successful at getting people immigration to Canada.
And Stephen, you made another important point about leaving the province. Well, you opened a can of worms for me here. The other problem is that I keep hearing people telling me, well, you know what, can I apply to this? And this is my pre-times during my college years that I used to hear all these people talk about that, hey, I'm moving to Canada, and I used to ask them, why are you going to Nova Scotia, man? What's up? So he's like, no, I'm just going to enter Nova Scotia, maybe stay there for like 10, 15 days. And then I'll file an application with the Canadian government that I can move to Toronto because I've got admission in a college. I don't think any legal system, and as a law student, I used to think all the time, how the hell is this possible? What country would make laws where they're inviting you to stay in that province to work for them and then they allow you to move? And that is a misconception, which is still, it's been 12, 13 years, it is still there. People still believe that they can go to any province and then just submit a letter saying, hey, I don't want to stay here anymore and I just want to move. I've got a job somewhere and move. Stephen, how do you explain that? Is it on exceptional basis, or I mean, how do you justify this?
Well, there's no sort of formal process where you would go ahead and say
Right.
to the government of Nova Scotia, "Hey, I'm leaving and I'm going."
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to this concept of intention. I intended to live in Nova Scotia. I signed, documentation, sworn documents in the process saying I intend to live in Nova Scotia. And if I come for 5 days and then leave, then there's a big issue, perhaps, with respect to misrepresentation, because the concept is you're going to live in Nova Scotia, you're going to live in Quebec, you're going to live in British Columbia when you go through these provincial nominee programs. So I just, as you state, I warn people, be very careful if you do something like that, because I believe the government would have a valid case against you.
Yeah, and Stephen, I mean, the government would know in 5 years when it comes time to renew your permanent resident card or to apply for Canadian citizenship, they go through a detailed address history, detailed history of what you've been doing in Canada for the last 5 years. And if they see that you immigrated through a provincial program and, intended to live in a particular province and leave after 15 days, that will open up a can of worms and likely result in an investigation into whether you misrepresented at the time of your landing.
And
we even had situations,
Yep.
Amber, not our clients, where we get a call from someone saying, "Hey, I got approved for immigration. It was great. I was going through the, provincial nominee program to Nova Scotia, and I had an onward ticket that went to Toronto." And the immigration officer who interviewed the person at the airport when they were coming to say, "I want to become an immigrant," said, "Oh, great." The immigration officer says, "Look, you got accepted. Congratulations. Welcome to Canada. But why do you have an ongoing ticket to Toronto after you're in Nova Scotia for 5 days?" And they turned around and refused the person entry. So, I mean, it's just, again, tell the truth. Tell the truth, what you really want to do. If you really want to live in Toronto, not Nova Scotia, not Saskatchewan, then don't go through their program.
And Stephen, I'll highlight again for all my listeners that this narrative sent by, there's a narrative sent by the agents in India, which is, and I think the subcontinent, I would say, not even India, is this, that don't you worry, I'm going to put you in one of the provinces, and then it's very simple. I mean, you just stay unemployed for like a month and then just write to them that I couldn't find the employment you promised me under law. And I want to switch from the province and go work somewhere else where I have better prospects of working. Now, is that true, Stephen? I mean, again, this is a legal point I want to raise here, because people come up to me, and now when we book these frauds in the court for Section 420 in the Indian Penal Code, which is for frauding out people or cheating, what I get to know from that is, after I see, and we do, refer to people to provide us with the info, there is no such, I think, piece of law as such is that says that, well, you can just move. I mean, I don't know these grounds. This is something, but I do get to hear.
Well, look, Amber, again, it's a question of law. It's a question of intention. And is staying 4 weeks in a province enough to satisfy the immigration officer that you didn't intend to defraud them? Is staying 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year? I mean, it's a question of law. And of course, I think as the more time you spend in the province, it's more difficult for immigration to say you misrepresented. Right. The smaller amount of time, it's much easier. But remember, Halit brings out a really interesting point. Look, people apply for immigration. It's taking a year and a half. And, everyone's stressed, waiting to see, when are my papers going to come? When are my papers come? Then my papers come. And I've gone through everything. And then I land in Canada, I become an immigrant, and if they do is where they stay 15 days and leave, and then when they apply for citizenship and they apply to renew their PR card, then they have all exempt and shouldn't end. If you misrepresented, the government should go after you, and they will.
No, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I want all my listeners to listen and go through, that it is not so simple as it sounds. And immigration can ruin your history otherwise with other countries as well. And maybe if you had a prospect of moving to Australia, if not Canada, even that is screwed if you do something like this, because everybody's sharing intelligence, everybody's sharing info, and you all know that that how it works. Now, Hailid, coming to another point in the express entry system, which I want to highlight specifically, is in the coming, let's say this is something to educate my listeners. What do you see in the coming months? Because we keep hearing from the Canadian government that we want more applicants and more vacancies coming up. So people, I mean, a lot of people on my show generally keep asking random questions, right? So I really cannot answer them. Maybe I'll now start directing them to you directly. What they ask is how is it going to open up? Like, this is something that was asked when I did a session with Josh. That what do you see about happening in the next 2 years? Is it fruitful? Is it really beneficial if we apply under the program under Express Entry or PNP? Is it going to be fruitful for us overall? So what do you have to say about that? Could you share some insight with the listeners as to how the program is going to be in the coming years?
Sure. So it's interesting. Last year, because of COVID, the government was not able to meet its immigration targets. And the government had announced back in the fall that for 2021, they're looking to increase the immigration numbers in terms of the number of people that become permanent residents by about 300,000 more than they admitted last year. So it's a pretty big target. And, right now, because of border restrictions and things like that, they are focusing primarily on people who have, as I said before, a year of Canadian work experience in order to try and meet the targets for this year while the border restrictions remain in place. But we are seeing that things are starting to open up, and as they open up, we anticipate that we will start to again see express entry draws under the federal skilled worker program, which draws candidates who maybe don't have a year of Canadian work experience and may have no Canadian work experience. And I think, because we haven't seen draws in that program over the last 6 months or so, the score required to get invited in that program initially will be higher than we may have seen in the past. And over time, as they start to invite more regularly, hopefully the score will start to even out a little bit. But what we may want to look at for people who are, looking to get their immigration and sort of have like a guaranteed sort of pathway, again, is, the job offer. And we talked about genuine job offer in Canada goes a long way to boosting a candidate's, not just their eligibility, but also the likelihood that they will get that invitation through the express entry system.
Well, Ali, that is one of the most important things. And I will also give my experience in this. I'm an approved permanent resident as well. I mean, I can talk to my listeners on this. And, I've tried whatnot until I met Stephen, and he guided me, and thankfully we have him, and and he helped us with the process, and thanks to Hailid and her team that we've started getting the proper response that we're looking for. So I want to tell you all out there that whatever happens, it is only a lawyer who can actually guide you as to how things should move and what needs to be done. I have known some people in Canada, and they said, well, if you write into us, we will do this, we will do that. And I have trail history of 1 year where I have, written to who not. And then I just spoke to Stephen, and he guided us, and we've had results. So this is the importance, as well as the importance of knowing the program in which you're applying in and processing it. So any last comments, Stephen, from your side, and Hailid, your side? It has been a pleasure till now to have interacted in all the important areas.
Well, I mean, look, I can tell you that in Canada, with respect to COVID, we are going to be the #1 country in the world with respect to first vaccinations, probably in the next 2 or 3 days of vaccinated people. The government announced yesterday that they are now looking at opening up our borders to fully vaccinated people to slowly permit them to come in. So I think, we've turned definitely the corner in Canada. I think you're going to see things start to ease up, become, the border will become more accessible to people. Visitors will be able to start coming, things like that. So that's what we're seeing now. And that's, it's happening very fast. So, maybe 3 weeks from now, you and I will have a different conversation, except you'll be sitting beside me. So let's see what happens.
I hope so. We've been waiting for years on this. Because and for all the listeners out there, this is true. All right. We've been waiting after being approved. So it's just not you. It's about everybody on this planet and the law. You can never violate the law and think of getting there. Please follow the due course and procedure. And Eileen, last statements from you or last comments from you. It's almost time up for you guys as well. So it was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. I guess my last comment would be to just indicate, although we have been closed and things are starting to open up a little bit more now, Canada ultimately wants permanent residents. So our government recognizes that we grow through immigration. It provides economic benefits to Canada. And we need it. And so, when they're looking to increase immigration numbers, I think, we'll see that increase as things start to open up. And if it's a situation where we look at a case and we see that, maybe you do need to come in temporarily first, it's a stepping stone and it's a pathway to ultimately become a permanent resident. We don't want people staying in temporary work permits forever. The government tries to find programs and ways to facilitate transitioning from temporary status to permanent. So I think things are looking up and, we're going to see an increase in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Eileen. And for all my listeners out there, stay tuned in. We're going to get more of legal associates and people from Green and Spiegel to come and talk about different programs to educate you about immigration before you take that big plunge. And I'm very thankful to them for being here and supporting this initiative with us. And for everyone out there, honestly, being a conventional law firm, and we started with this initiative, with the help of Stephen and everybody at Green and Spiegel, because of the reason that I've seen a lot of people suffer in India, and as we all know, we all have aspirations to move around and get our permanent residency sorted. So just seek the right advice, just keep tuning into our show, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here, and it was a lovely session to have you both and commit to this 1 hour to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsor on the network this week, Credencia. Thank you so much for making this possible. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by actress Shreya Pilgaonkar to talk about her career in acting. On Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi lists down the modern concepts of friendship and how one can choose the right friend circle in life on Begin the Journey. On The Habit Coach, Ashton Doctor was joined by Aisha Bilamoria to talk about running and developing an athletic mentality. Farhad and Sunethra are joined by LGBTQ workplace advocate Suresh Ramdas to discuss the new normal in queer relationships on GayBCD. On Tere Mere Raaste, Keshav Chaturvedi takes us to the riverbanks of Banaras and describes the soulful mornings to us. And finally, on the Positively Unlimited podcast, Chetna Chakravarti takes the fear out of the word responsibility. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
2020 is a difficult year. A global pandemic, protests, elections, recessions. You get the picture. What we need is a space where we can have nuanced discussions about global affairs and foreign policy. That's where I come in. My name is Hamsini Hariharan and I host the States of Anarchy podcast. Every second Tuesday, I speak to experts in the field of international relations to make a little more sense of the world. So join me on the IVM podcast app, website, or wherever you're listening to me right now.